Tony John in conversation.
Luke, thank you for being here.
You're most welcome. Good morning, brother-in-law Tony.
Good morning, brother-in-law Luke. That's a good start. Now, brother-in-law Luke, let me ask you something. I've heard this expression and I found it very intriguing. Someone once told me Switzerland is a bank disguising itself as a country. How do you feel about that?
I think you can put that in the past.
Yeah?
That was the past. That's what happened after World War II, and that has entirely changed in the 10 last years. We've cleaned our markets up, and we are a clean market now. So under the pressure of the Americans, who exactly do what we used to do. So I don't think it's accurate anymore. But it's still the image that people would have.
So that's where I want to start, because indeed there is a brand called Switzerland. It's got an image attached to it, certain ideas attached to it. But as I've been going in and out of Switzerland for a long time now, I've realized it's a country like any other, right? So I want to start off by just giving some context to Switzerland. How is it set up as a nation, actually? I mean, are there states in Switzerland? Are there regions? Because I know there are many languages as well, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that Switzerland was born through a war and domination by the Habsburgs. And it's all linked to the Alps. The Habsburgs would have the power over the Alps. That means they would collect the money of the passages through the Alps, and the Swiss farmers of central Switzerland would clean up the passages. And at one point they said, we're done with that. Let's kick the asses of these guys and take the passages over. So 3 cantons united, Uri, Schwyz and Unterwald, the farmers united, and fought against the Habsburg and took control.
What are cantons, Luke? Sorry to interrupt.
Uri, Schwyz and Unterwald.
No, but what is the meaning of a canton?
A canton is a land. Is a land.
So would it be like a state?
A canton would be a state. There were states in those days. So 3 states united. They were small, so they needed to unite to be able to resist or to beat the Habsburgs. And they took control passage of the Alps. And from there on, other little states around united with time to be able to be stronger and resist more and more to enemies that were all around. Italy, Germany, Austria, France, which were all much stronger countries than us. So it took about 800 years to create out of 26 little states the state of Switzerland, as you know it now.
So they were united by a common desire to take control of their own lives, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because life was very hard and they were very poor.
So the surrounding countries influence the languages of Switzerland, right? Because it's also multilingual.
Sure. The south would speak Italian, the north would speak German, and the west, would speak French.
Does that also reflect in cultural differences in Switzerland?
Yeah, there are great cultural differences. First of all, you need to know that the Swiss Germans don't like to be looked at as Germans. They're really Swiss Germans with their own language. Germans hardly understand the Swiss German. And there's as many Swiss Germans as there are Swiss German cantons. The dialects vary from a canton to another very much. The French-speaking, it's the normal French, except that the French make fun of us because we speak it slower. And of course, the Italian, well, that's the influence of Italy that is very close by. It's on the south part of the Alps. It's actually quite funny that we've been able to keep Ticino, the Italian part of Switzerland, because it's on the south part. It would be difficult to defend. But funnily enough, we could keep it and save it from the Italians.
Okay. And so there's no such thing as a Swiss type. There are different types of Swiss people.
True.
I mean, generalization. People tend to generalize, right?
No, there would not be a Swiss type. I think there would be a Swiss Roman, a Swiss German, a Schweizerdeutsch, and a Ticino boy. They'd be very different.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. You're a lawyer. You have your own law firm, and you practice law. But again, because of the cultural, language differences, etc., you practice law in the French part of Switzerland, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and the canton or the state is called Fribourg.
Yes.
Right? Does it make it difficult to practice law or have clients outside of the French-speaking part?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the canton in which I practice is called Fribourg, and not Freiburg, although it also is Freiburg, but people mix it up with Freiburg in Brisgau, which is in Germany, in south of Germany. But Freiburg, my Freiburg, is the barrier of languages. There's a river in between, which on one side is German-speaking, on the other side is French-speaking. So I've always lived and been raised in a canton that spoke both languages. So my law firm does speak both languages, German and French. So we do serve clients in the German-speaking part, but mostly in the French-speaking part, since Fribourg is in majority 70% French-speaking. But it's true that it makes your life a little bit more complicated, but interesting too. You need to have the languages in Switzerland to be able to get around.
Yeah, and you have, I think, at least from the outside looking in, you have built a very successful firm, and you're a successful lawyer yourself. And I think it's quite interesting. Speaking of the Swiss type, the cardboard cutout or the template, right? I was really, really intrigued from the first time I met you because you didn't fit that, right? I had an idea of what a Swiss person was. And each and every time, Luke, for over 30 years, you constantly surprise me because you are you, you know?
Very nice of you to say that. Actually, yesterday I was on a terrace and a guy said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Switzerland." He said, "Oh, I'm shocked. You look pretty nice and sexy for a Swiss man." So, but I don't consider myself absolutely Swiss. First of all, I'm half English. My mom's English. I've studied in America, and I'm lucky enough to have a Dutch family with a brother-in-law coming from Malaysia, meaning that I've been exposed to many cultures and many different ways of thinking, and I'm very open to the world, which, helped me become what I am. So I think Switzerland is part of me, but it's probably the tiniest part.
And what would be the less tiny parts of you? What has informed the person that you are the most? Which of your many cultures?
I would say the English culture. My grandfather lived with us for 17 years. He was a very well-educated person, and of course, a person that was exposed to the world already in 1900, having to travel all over the place as a geologist. So that has influenced me more than the culture I received from my dad's family, who was just Fribourg people, peasants that stayed in Fribourg. So I was from my childhood exposed to different ways of thinking.
Your grandfather, you see, after knowing you all this time, I never knew this. Your grandfather was a geologist. And
my grandfather was a geologist. He came out second of his class in Cambridge in 1923 and was sent by British Petroleum to Sumatra to get some oil. And in those days, your dad would decide what you would do. And his father was a lawyer himself, rich, and said, "Son, you're coming back and you're going to serve the church." And he became an Anglican priest on the order of his father. But still, being able to study at Cambridge in the 1990s is 1900 is something very different to what you would be exposed in Switzerland. In 1900 in Switzerland, you would be very poor. Do not forget that Switzerland, in between World War I and World War II, was the poorest country of Europe. It was not a rich bank. It was the poorest country of Europe. So no one would have access except the very rich to studies. But my grandfather was living in the British Empire. So he was lucky enough to study. And he passed us over this culture of the world and this culture of higher education.
And his education was in geology, which I find quite intriguing because I think geography, the land, is something that I always associate to you because every time we are together, it's a walk with Luke, it's exploring, it's adventure, and you have this, it almost feels like this yearning, hunger to take people and share with them the things you've discovered, right?
You're right.
And you do love that, don't you? You do love exploring places and...
Oh, I absolutely love it. I just actually come back. I flew from Edinburgh to here. I went to play golf in Scotland. I played on the St. Andrews Old Course, which is really amazing, a legendary place. And I loved the country. I felt like being home there. I felt the land like being my landscape. And I like the people, very kind, very open. And it enriches me. I'm looking forward to go to India soon and discover other countries. Yeah.
Why did Scotland feel like your land? What aspect of it?
The atmosphere, the sceneries, it's difficult to describe. I feel it's a place that I have lived. It's not only Scotland, but I would say the entire British Isles. The weather, the nature, the people, the warmth of the people, the sea. And I've actually never really lived a long time there, but I have a feeling of roots there.
That's very interesting. Your wife is Dutch.
My wife is Dutch.
You've been together for many, many years.
Yeah.
So and Holland is part of you as well, right? What does the Netherlands represent to you?
An open-minded country, very dynamic. Many pretty girls on their bikes in Amsterdam.
That's true. That's Amsterdam's claim to fame. Pretty girls on bikes, yeah?
Open-minded people, art, culture. Open-mindedness.
So,
mainly open-mindedness.
You've traveled so much, Luke, and what I find interesting is that you're curious by nature. You speak to strangers. You have in-depth conversations with anyone you come across. You're not biased in that way to select who you speak to. I've seen that happen in real life. You constantly want to inquire and dig into the minds of people to find out, who they are, what makes them tick.
True.
And because of that, I think you've put yourself in a great position also, and that's why you're a great lawyer, I think, which is to kind of understand and map out the differences, right? And to understand values, right? What do you think are really important values, Dutch values, that the world could spend a bit more time exploring and understanding?
Open mind, facility to connect with other people, courage, a sense of money, a strong sense of money, maybe not always very generous, but a sense of how to make some money, and I think a sense to explore, a sense to go further than their borders, since this land is so small and there's probably not very much on this land except a few sheep and a little bit of oil on the sea. So I think there are people that need to go away, need to meet other people, and need to be open-minded. And I think I very strongly feel this here. Very easily, if you sit on the terrace, like I mentioned last night, well, people would talk to you. It'd be difficult to drink your coffee with the neighbor ignoring you.
And you think that's something that's unique to this country?
It's not unique, but it's probably the country where this quality expresses itself very quickly. You very quickly get that. You go to the concert, the people beside you would probably talk to you, or at least if you talk to them, they will reply, and not just by yes or no. They will engage into the conversation. The same applies to a terrace and in a restaurant. So they're open-minded people.
So I have this struggle very often about conversations like this, right? Because I find it hard to imagine that there are places and cultures where if you spoke to someone sitting next to you at a concert, they would not answer, right? And I've had this conversation not just about openness, but also about the fact that when I came to the Netherlands, right, in 1999, I was on a visit here. I didn't move here yet, or maybe it was even before that, 1995 actually. And the first time I arrived, everyone spoke to me in Dutch. And I said this, for me, was the formation of my relationship with the Netherlands, which was, you are Dutch until you tell them you're not. Because I thought I looked the furthest thing from a Dutchman. And yet everybody was speaking to me first in Dutch. So they never assumed I was from somewhere else. They assumed I was one of them, right? That really informed maybe this love affair I have with this culture very much. But whenever I talk about this and my experiences here, that I've never really felt any sort of prejudice against me for whatever reason, whether because of my lack of ability to speak Dutch or my skin color, I've never experienced prejudice or racism. People often reply, but that's because of who you are. And if you were different, you would have experienced it. And is it because of who you are that people open up, people want to talk versus the average person?
It's a good question, but I don't think so. I feel like you just described. I think they're simply open-minded. And as you said, if you don't say that you don't understand the language, until then they'll speak to you in Dutch and consider you as Dutch. You're totally right. And it's a very multicultural culture. You talk of skin color, of course, it could be at first more difficult for you to integrate, but there is no differences. You see so many different cultures, black, white, yellow, every culture is there, and everybody's open-minded. Oh, I sort of agree with what you say, yes.
Yeah. You said one of the traits of Dutchness, so to speak, or the culture is courage. How does this manifest to you? In what shape and form, this courage?
They've always gone beyond their borders to survive and develop themselves. They've always been open to others, and they never feared going further than what their eyes could see. Think of the navigators that went all around the world. They had to, because they had to develop. Okay, they had done well on their own country, but they had that need to go further on, and they were never scared, and they still not are scared. They're very inventive also in terms of technologies and in terms of conquering the world. It still goes on. They've managed to keep Amsterdam through Schiphol the largest port of the world. And that's always been. They have visions. It's a country with visions.
That's interesting, and you have you see this as a kind of continuation of a mindset that's existed for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you mentioned historically,
Yeah.
trading, going out on ships
Yeah,
to the great
yeah.
unknown.
It's still going on.
It's still going on. Huh? Yeah, and I think that that's something that I also maybe see in a different way, which is just the ability to say whatever's on your mind without this fear of judgment, of being seen as dumb or uninformed, right?
That's true.
A lot of Dutch people just speak their minds, right? And I think it takes a lot of courage to speak your mind. I grew up in Asia, where there was so much social conditioning, and you had to present yourself in the right way, say the right words, right? And that was for me the biggest culture shock. The unafraidness of Dutch people to just say whatever, not caring how other people would think of them, the impression they would form of them.
Sure.
And on a personal level, I think that,
Well, think of the way they behave in terms of their sexuality. I mean, it's a country where you see many homosexuals, and people would walk hand in hand as homosexuals long, long time ago, and that would be considered shocking in some countries like mine. I mean, it's a little sign of how open-minded this country is, it's just an example of what's going on. I see now people also, you hear that Holland has a lot of people who change their sexes, they come here. I mean, okay, it could be shocking to some other countries, but it's an openness, it's an open-minded society.
yeah. And I think the interesting thing is, at least up to now, it's kind of like it's open-mindedness with a level of sensibility still operating,
Sure.
which means it's not like, let's go this way now because that's what the world is doing, right? They always have this kind of centering mechanism at play as well. So they're open to new and different things, but at the same time, there seems to be a central gravitational force that keeps people grounded. At least maybe in North Holland, I still see that. They say it's that Fries mentality, right? Very down to earth, etc. And I kind of feel that is a Dutch thing as well. Crazy ideas and all, but they're still kind of like rooted, And
Because they're farmers, basically.
Yeah, but Switzerland is also having that shared trait, right?
But we don't have seas. So we were blocked by our mountains. So you would stay in your country. It'd be much more difficult to go beyond what your eyes could see, because you would have to go through the Alps, which was very, very difficult. So I think naturally and geographically, our country allows much less adventure than some other countries, such Great Britain or Holland, for example.
Do you see that in the people you deal with professionally, that mentality of being isolated, forming who you are as?
It depends on the generations. In the younger generations, people would take EasyJet and travel all over the world. Less, but in the older generations, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Luke, I want to ask you something about your professional life. It's going to sound like a really abstract question, but I want to start there. What does the law mean to you?
The law means to me evolution of society, because the law reflects what our society is. It's always a little step behind what the real society is, what our social life is, but it is a picture of what our social life is. And we try in the law to reflect the way we're living and what needs to be said as good or bad. So it's a reflection of society. You can look into the mirror, you look at society, look into the mirror, you see the law.
So there's not per se a definition of good or bad. It's a reflection of what is in the moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and are there those principles that are unchanging?
Oh, of course, yeah. The basic principles, principle of freedom of speech, and all those large principles, of course, are the grounding principles of the legal system, at least in Western Europe. But for the rest, on a local basis, it reflects the way we live, the mentalities we have, the problems we have, and then we need to regulate all that into the law.
What attracted you to the law?
Oh, frankly, the fact that I thought I could do it a bit faster than other studies I had in my head. I actually wanted to be a geologist. But,
grandfather.
Like my grandfather, but especially because I was attracted by discovering the world. But I was not good enough in my math, so I thought it would take me too much time, so I went to law. And then you discover, because at the beginning law is quite boring as a student, but you discover the pleasures of law with time. and you find out that law is not something so abstract, that it's quite lively and it's linked to, as I said, to what's going on in the world and what's going on in your daily basis of everyone's life. So it takes time to make it attractive. Geology, you immediately think it's going to be very attractive because you think I'm going to go and discover oil and gas everywhere in the world. So the law path is a bit harder, but it's probably more interesting on the long term.
And what about once you get past the rough patches in the early stages, right? What about the law gives you pleasure?
It gives me pleasure in the sense that it makes me meet a lot of variety of people with a lot of variety of problems to solve, and it's again a reflection of the social life, of what people are living, what people are accepting, not accepting, what they're doing, growing, building, creating. So it's very creative.
You once told me, Luke, in a conversation, that it's not fun to be in a profession where when someone opens the door to come in, to your business, they're doing so because they're facing problems. And you told me in that conversation, no one wants to see a lawyer when life is good. They only see their lawyers when life is not good, when things are going wrong, when things are bad, right? When you told me that, there's something that hit me, which is just as human beings, you try to fill your life with as many things that stimulate you, that give you joy and happiness, right? But if a large chunk of it, which is what someone's career is, someone's work is, right? If a large chunk of your day, your week, your month, your year, right, is made up of problems people are facing, and when someone's trying to explain a problem to you, the emotion in a way transfers, right? Because that's how people communicate. How do you deal with that as a human being, to deal with people having problems?
Well, first of all, you need to be convinced that you're going to help them with their problems. The first part is very difficult because the people will have difficulty to admit that I'm not going to repeat in a smarter way what they say or think. I'm going to look at their case very objectively and give them their position. Say that's where you stay. That's where your case is, and that's the weak part, and that's the strong part. And sometimes people don't accept that because they think that the lawyer is just a magician who's going to transform what's been going wrong or right in their lives in a couple of minutes. No. I mean, you're first going to tell them, like a doctor, are you sick? Are you very sick? And can I treat you? And then if the person accepts that he is sick and there is something to do, well, we need to discuss the treatment together and find the best possible way to get him out of his trouble. So from a very negative beginning, you can turn it into something positive. Maybe you don't always reach success, but you reach something, that takes the people out of their problem in some type of way. So you can conduct them, but you need to have a very good relationship with them, and they need to trust your judgment. And that's the difficult part, because many people think that, okay, since a lawyer is considered to be expensive, which is not really always the case, just by the fact he's going to be expensive, he's going to do miracles. And we're not miracle makers, no.
So that's expectation, right? People have false expectations just because they're paying a bill, right? They expect a solution.
Not all, but some.
Yeah, some do, right? But I'm more interested in how do you inoculate yourself? How do you vaccinate yourself against people who constantly are walking in with problems, with the heaviness of problems, of frustration, of anger, of panic, of fear, right? And you see the whole spectrum, right? As a lawyer, whether you're doing criminal law, corporate law, whatever, right? You tend to see the spectrum of issues human beings are facing. How do you prevent those becoming a part of your life as well? Like a doctor, you said,
I think with time helps. At the beginning, you sort of tend to take all your clients' problems with you, and then it can be difficult. But experience teaches you that to be a good lawyer, you need to keep your client's problem outside of you, so you can remain neutral and have a good feeling about the way to deal with them. So you have to walk beside your client and not with your client. You don't have to integrate your client's problem. And also the fact that that at one point you're helping him out. If he accepts the way you're helping out, it gives you a bit of peace.
You said in the beginning you tend to take it on, right? Did you as well in the beginning?
Oh, sure, everyone does.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when was what was the trigger? When was that moment? Was there a moment that happened where you went, okay, I'm beginning to understand how to deal with this now. I need to park this at the office, and when I go home, I'm Luke, the husband, the father, and not the lawyer anymore.
I think the trigger was when the guy I studied with and the guy I became a lawyer with, my maître de stage, you would say in French, my master of my apprenticeship, we had a very difficult murder case, and I asked him, because I had to go and see our client, who was the presumed murderer, I said, do you think he did it? And he told me, it's not up to you to have a conviction. It's the judge's problem. It's not ours. That helped me very much. Say, well, in fact, yeah, it doesn't matter to me whether he has killed the person or not. That's not my job. It's a judge who's going to say whether he's killed him or not, or whether he's guilty or not. My job is to conduct this person in this procedure and make sure that he gets treated fairly. So that has helped me a lot to distinguish my role. My role is to defend, and my role is not to judge, and my role is not to decide if someone did right or wrong.
Luke, have you not faced the very human reaction to say that that's bad? Because if you have a feeling that someone had committed a crime, how can you still defend that person? How can you even risk getting that person off if you suspect? Because you're human after all, right? You're not a machine to block that completely, right? Have you not faced that opinion?
I have, a couple of times. It's part of your mission. It's just part of your mission. You just not have to, you cannot go to the judge and say just the crazy stuff your client is saying, but you cannot contradict what your client is saying. So you need to show the judge what in your client's version is credible and what should be taken into account. But yeah, it does happen that sometimes you think, well, this is... But of course, if it goes against your morale, if it goes against your ethics, you can refuse such a client. You don't have to defend him unless you're appointed by the state. But if you're not appointed by the state and you think this is really too filthy crime, I can't take it, well, you can still choose not to take it.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you've never had to face that dilemma, right?
No.
No. Touch wood. Very good. I'm not going to knock the table because that's going to be picked up. But I am going to knock on something else you said now.
Okay.
I'm not going to knock it, actually. I'm going to revisit it, which is about conflict resolution, right? You once mentioned to me that ideally you don't want something to go to trial. And in most cases, resolution comes by just getting people to talk to each other. Because conflict kind of makes people disconnect from communication, right? And you told me that one of the things you try to focus on is to get communication going again. Tell me about that, because I'm really curious about that.
It's a good, but it's a very large question. My role starts far before there is any tension. My role is first to advise the people. And hopefully people come before they have a problem. Say, I have this and this project, I'm going to do this and this, we did this and this partner. So you tell him, well, maybe you need to write the contract down, maybe you need to, clarify what your ideas are and put them in writing. If things go wrong and people start having tension, the first thing you does, and you do, and the law does it too, and the judge does it too also, is to explore if there's a way to settle the case and find a way to have the people go back to peace and go back to what they usually do. But it's not always easy. It's, again, a matter of not only a good contact with your own client, but be able to build a trust relationship, if not with the counter lawyer, at least with his client. And it's a very difficult and tricky one, because you have to have the will and the strength yourself to see that it's the client's interest to find a way out. That's the first thing. The second thing, you need to convey that to your client. He has to understand that. And then you need to get into touch with the counterparty. And sometimes the door is just closed and you just can't open it. And once it gets open, well, it's a negotiation matter. It's a little bit like the souk in Marrakesh. So, you go up and down. And so it's an energy-taking thing. But the key point is, if you have a counterparty, is whether that counterparty accepts to open the door and start talking. And that you have very little influence on.
But it's something you pursue, right?
I pursue every day.
Okay.
Every day. Most cases with success, but not always. And when you don't succeed, well, there is the law and there's the justice and there's the court system, and then you hope you've got the good case and you do your best in front of justice.
So doing your best in front of justice in the court system, standing in a court alongside other lawyers, right? When you speak of your profession, you speak of the law. Um, it's obvious you're a lawyer and you've got vast amounts of experience. And then when I look at you sitting there with your leather jacket and your t-shirt, it reminds me of something that I always love about you, which is, you have your own sense of style, very much, right? And it's so, going back to the first remark about, is there a Swiss template, a Swiss prototype person, right?
Yeah.
Or personality? You challenge everything. And also, I think as a lawyer, and I remember we had a conversation about this once, and you were mentioning how you purposely dressed extra flamboyant because it made the other lawyer nervous to see you that way, right? You're shaking your head, Luke, but I just think you have a very distinctive sense of style, but you're a very sharp human being in observing human nature and understanding how to play with human nature as well. And there's an English expression that goes, clothes make the man, right? And I get this feeling you understand how apparel, clothes, can help you in any given situation. That's my feeling. Am I wrong or right in this?
I can make it worse, even different, by taking my hair out, which will make me, and I never do that in court, of course, because a Fribourg judge would be shocked. Already they think that I'm a bit too original. First of all, I'm interested in fashion, generally speaking, so there's no real effort there. Secondly, I probably would not go to court with my leather jacket. Here I came to meet my brother-in-law, and I'm on a weekend in a cool city where I don't wear a tie. And actually, it's years I don't wear a tie. Years and years I don't wear a tie, just because I felt no need to wear a tie. So it started there. And then, of course, you start wearing colors and looking a little bit different. And I see other of my colleagues doing it now, and it has become, generally speaking, less strict. But it's true that it can be a sort of a marketing way. Didn't really realize it was, but it can become, and I do hear people saying of me, you always dress cool, you're always dressed up cool, you look different. I absolutely don't realize it. I don't do it on purpose. But now that I'm being told of it, I sort of think, am I overdressed, or am I too different? But it's true, for me, it's a feeling of independence. A lawyer should be independent from the system, from his client, from everything, to be able to give what he thinks is the good advice. So being independent, I do not accept that I would have to wear a suit and a tie to go in front of court. I'm not that person. I'm independent from the judge too. Totally independent from my client too. I don't care if he thinks my long hair is crazy. I'm independent. I'm there to serve him. And I think the way I look is also an external sign of my total independence, including in boards. I sit in boards of large companies where people are quite strict, and I might do look a little bit different. I heard no one say anything about my ponytail until yet, but probably they do think, especially if I can think of a few Dutch companies where people are quite formal, but they're open-minded and they accept, but they might think in the back of their head, why the hell does this guy have a ponytail? So it's maybe a little sign of my independence.
There's a concept called a totem, and a good example are superheroes, right? So Clark Kent is a journalist. He's in a suit, but when he wants to turn into Superman, he sheds that and he puts on his cape and his outfit, right? And like that, there are ways people get into a persona that they need to. He needs to take off the suit to become Superman, right? Otherwise, he's Clark Kent. And Clark Kent can't save the world and stop the speeding train, right? But Superman can. So to step into the persona, people have totems. Sometimes people put on glasses before a meeting starts because that puts them in character. Do you think the clothes help you get into that character of, I am independent from all these forces around me and I need to perform best as a lawyer?
I think so, yeah. I think so. And I think the example of Superman is a good example. Not that I think that I'm Superman, but sometimes I think, am I Clark Kent? Am I Luc Gillon? Or am I someone a bit different? Not the Superman, but the Super Luke.
The alter ego, yeah.
Yeah, who is the real Luke? Is it the guy wearing the leather jacket with long hair? Or is it the good little boy that went to law school and put up a law firm? I don't know. I'm about to find out, I think. It's time I find out.
So, why is it now time you're going to find out? Is there an event on the horizon?
Oh, it's just, I'm 63 and I have a strong feeling that it's time to be entirely free from the system, entirely free from everything, and just be able to be myself.
Luke, what about, so it's super ironic I'm hearing this from you, huh? Because that's one of the things that I love about you, which is I always feel you are you. Huh? You are you sometimes when you complain about things going on. You are you when you are excited about saying, let's go for a walk, even though half the people want to just hang around doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
You always are you. And I've seen you also outside of private situations. I've seen you, when you're meeting people you do business with, etc. And I see the same person. And so to hear you say, who is Luc Gillon, right? It feels to me quite surprising because it kind of feels you've settled into your skin and you had a long time ago to me. So what am I missing here? What am I...
Maybe you're missing nothing. Maybe it's just up to me to realize that I am me already. It's just up to me to realize. Maybe I've been too busy doing too many different things and you think, maybe I am at my right place. I just have to realize it, and it's good for me to hear what you've just said. It helps me.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because at the end of the day, no matter what, right, only we know the truth of who we are.
Yeah.
And some people are really good at broadcasting a version of themselves, but it can be a total false version of who they truly feel when they're alone with their thoughts, right?
It's true.
And maybe that's the mistake I'm making, which is assuming what you broadcast to me is the total you, right? Maybe you are aware of other parts of you that might be areas you want to discover still.
But there is, like you, there is Luke the lawyer, Luke the father, Luke the husband, Luke the friend, Luke the person who helps people here and there, Luke the president of foundations. So you are in life brings you into different roles, and sometimes it's difficult, I think, to perceive where is the absolute Luke, if I can say. Maybe there's only one, as you just said, and I am the same in all the different roles. But those roles sometimes are so different and varied that you sort of doubt, you surely don't act the same in the way you talk to your kids than the way you talk to your clients or the way you reason. So sometimes it makes me doubt, am I the one Luke?
Do you need to be one Luke?
Good question. I have no answer to that, not yet.
There was a really interesting story I heard from a psychologist about a system he's developed. I can't get the name, but it's something like family formation systems or something. But it was the outcome of treating a girl who was violently raped, right? And in the moment of the rape happening, she had a split. Something happened within her, and a new persona appeared. And the persona was watching what was happening to her. But because that split occurred, she stopped feeling physical pain, or she could manage the physical pain because the pain was so unbearable that it caused a rupture in her personality, right? And this persona could observe without being part of what was going on. It became a defense mechanism, but every time she faced trauma, that personality would show up again to protect the other version of her from experiencing pain. And when I heard that, the psychologist also said that actually everyone has multiple personalities, right? And they may appear in different times of your life. As a child, if you're bullied, that could have happened. You could have developed another version of Tony. I could have developed that, right? And that Tony steps up whenever he feels the other Tony is being bullied. So you develop a defensive mechanism which manifests into a persona, and the persona has a specific function. And what I learned from that conversation was that maybe it's necessary to have multiple personas so you can deal with the many aspects of life that happens to you on a daily basis. And because life is not one-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, right? And that's why I wonder if there's such a thing as there's one version that can deal with everything, or whether we need those multiple versions to cope.
We probably need the multiple versions. And what you're saying is very interesting. It makes me realize that maybe one of my interests in discovering the world, and especially discovering the world, meeting the different people of the world and understanding how they function, is helping me to understand there's so many versions of every single human being, and there's so many different history that fascinates me entirely. So maybe sometimes I reflect that onto me and I think, oh, compared to this person I've met and this way of living, where do I sit there? Where am I there? It's a constant process of learning and finding out. I hope I won't have to go through horrible pain as you described for this poor young woman to find out if.
Well,
there's
that
one
was an
look or-
extreme
Yeah,
case,
sure.
which opened up a whole new area of treatment, right? You know, a whole methodology of treatment. But it was clear that even your reality is your reality. So in that situation, it was a rape, but you know, it can also be witnessing an accident.
Sure.
You know, it can be falling off, you know, your bicycle, right? In that moment, the trauma, the experience can be so intense, right? And so it's not about having to endure something extreme, but it's just life and everything life throws at you, you know, from the time you're born. Certain events cause certain things to happen. And it was I found it very comforting. I found it comforting to know that I'm not a crazy guy. Because I even talk to myself. I talk to myself very often. And, you know, my family make fun of that, right? But, you know, when I heard that conversation, I kind of went, maybe that's normal, you know? Maybe it's normal to entertain these different versions of yourself. And I have conversations with myself. I always thought I was talking to myself. But now I maybe am beginning to start to rephrase that to say that different versions of me are having a conversation, you know, kind of like a trial going on within me to reach a conclusion, right?
Yeah. I have that feeling too. I probably talk to myself too, a lot, especially in the night. I think a lot. So yeah, what you say speaks to me. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we are crazy together.
Yeah, totally. We've always been.
That is
And
true.
that's the joy of knowing you.
That's the truth. That's the truth. I totally agree. I want to revisit something you said earlier about the bio of your life. So you've had a long-lasting relationship with a lovely human being. You've got 3 successful children, right? You've got a successful practice. Career-wise, you know, it's going very well for you, right? From the outside looking at you, right, it feels like you're winning life, right? But I want to ask you now again, I want to go beyond what I see in Luke. I want to ask what Luke sees in Luke. What is winning life to you? How would you describe winning life?
It's nice of you to describe that I have a winning life, and it's good for me to hear it because I don't always realize it, because I'm always building further, and I'm always a bit cautious and scared of everything. Even if you mentioned my children, you think they've done well. Well, you think, you know, are they going to succeed? Are they going to, you know, next step? They finish their studies and then they get married, and then are they going to have a house? Are they going to have a decent job? So I never see things as finished and complete. I always fear that something bad could happen. So it's really helping me to hear that you say I have such a success, and I should know that more and realize it more, and I should be more thankful for it actually, and enjoy it more, because I'm always trying to, you know, go beyond and build security. I've always been trying to build security for everybody around me. So while doing that, you don't see how much you've built behind you. So again, what you just said helped me reflect what I have actually built and gives me a bit of comfort. Thanks for saying it.
No, but I think it's very let's put it this way. It's kind of like the universal standard of someone who's winning life or losing life at the game of life, let's say, right? And by that universal measurement, you look like someone in the column of a person who's winning at the game of life, right? You know, but it can be a real trap, that people think that everything is fine with you and they don't stop to ask, are you fine? You know, because it looks like everything is going great. You have no right almost to not feel fine, right? So you say, though, however, you're constantly wanting to build security for others, right? So in your own reality, your own experience of life, you have this concern that keeps popping up about the various people in your life. And I would dare say, you don't just, it's not just exclusive to your family and your children. You have this desire to build security for people around you. That's my impression. I know how much you've helped us, and I see how much you help many people, related, not related to you, right? You have this desire to help people become more secure, to build security in their lives. Where does this come from?
I think it's natural. I don't force myself. I don't feel it like an effort. If you can do it, you do it. I mean, if it's the people that you love and that are around you and you can do something, it's nice.
You say it's natural.
It's
Is it
natural?
natural?
It gives me pleasure. It gives me the ability of being able to share is not an effort. It's absolutely not an effort. It's a pleasure. I want the people that are around me being balanced and happy and spend nice time with me.
Is that how your upbringing was? That people around you, your parents, maybe people around you, felt the same way, the desire to share? And
I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure.
so that's what I'm curious about, because I don't see this trait very often. You know, you say it's natural, and it's natural to you, right, as a human being. How can it not be? Because that's your experience. But if this was natural, a natural state of a human being, I think the world would be a far better place.
Oh, it's nice of you to say that.
But wouldn't it be if
Yeah.
people wanted to share versus, accumulate for
I
themselves?
can't explain it. It's just like that. It's not. I don't feel obliged to do whatever I do, and it's small things. I'm sure everyone does it in his own way somehow at one point or another in his life.
Okay. Okay. It's. I think it's sweet of you to be humble about this. But also, maybe it's very important to see an outside perspective. And I can safely tell you, I don't think it's very common, because the one thing you share that I find the most precious thing, right, is your time and attention. If someone were to ask you something, you would give them your time and attention to talk to them, right? And that's what I also mentioned earlier. I see you investing your time in speaking to total strangers. You're curious by nature, but still, when you start a conversation, you don't do it for small talk. You want to get into the meat of a conversation.
Because it
yeah.
interests me.
Yeah.
Because I get something out of it.
What
I
do you
enjoy
get?
it.
What do you get out of that? Is it enjoyment or?
Yeah, it's enjoyment and understanding how it works, understanding how the world works, how the people think, what their status are. It interests me. It's actually very. It interests me. I like reading biographies. I like understanding how things work and how things get together. And yeah.
Do you think this was always the case with you, or is it your profession that's influenced or kind of triggered this desire to discover how people are?
I think it was always the case. I didn't always express it, and I wasn't always aware of it. But once you let things go, and that's meeting the people, you're part of it. Meeting other people, other cultures, open minds. It helps you develop your personality. And Tony, you're certainly one of the guys who has, opened me to a lot of things and made my life different. We are very different. I built security. And sometimes I think you live in some type of insecurity, but it's not insecurity. You just have a different approach. You live more by day than I do. And I often think he's right. I'm too much into planning and securing everything. And so it's meeting people like you that has helped me build my personality and made the person I am.
That's lovely to hear. And for me, that's exposure, right? I think that's the value of exposure to different people in your life. If you're willing to observe and be critical, right? Which is, there's something to learn. And I admire the security. I mean, very often we talk about the children, right?
Yeah.
I admire your level of commitment to wanting to create security for your children. It's a wonderful trait. I don't always agree with it, because I kind of also believe in tough love. And I think at one point, you have to make your way in the world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to feel helpless if something goes off script, right? So that's where I would disagree sometimes in the level, but still, as a human being,
But
this
I
is...
hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that, and it does influence me. I hear that.
Yeah?
And I know that.
Okay. Yet, I kind of think this is you. And I say that because it's not something you exclusively practice with your children. Like I said, you practice it with a lot of people, So maybe this is just who you are by nature. This is your personality type. You are the protector, the nurturer, and the funny thing is, right, as I've known you long enough, right, I also have seen something that just amazes me about you, which is there are certain people that you can really complain about, but you are the first person to help them if they need help. And I find that so fascinating that there is the separation about an opinion or a reaction to a behavior of a person versus the human connection and how you should be there as a human being for them, you know? You know what I mean? There's the
I know
noise
what I
and then
mean.
there's the...
I mean, if it's someone that is in the large circle of love, and it doesn't not necessarily have to be your own circle of love, but if it's included in a circle of love of other people that you love, and they include those people in your circle of love, I think it's important to be able to be there. So you see, it's not your own circle of love; it's the circle of love of the other people that are in your circle. And if you make those people in your circle of love, happy by being able to be close to their circle of love, it helps yours.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. And I wish more people would think that way, because I mean, then you would be more conscious of your behavior, and I think you'd be more engineered towards helping others, and helping them. It can be small ways, but just being a source of positive energy.
That's one way of seeing it. You can also see it the other way. It's sort of being egoistic too, because ultimately, by doing what I do, is you want to feel good yourself.
That's what they say about Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone considers her a saint, but I've heard a discussion about how it was one of the most egocentric things. She needed to have victims in order for her to feel a sense of self, right? Because without anyone to help, would she have a purpose? Yeah. Would she be Mother Teresa, right? I don't know. I still think, maybe I'm naive, but I still think it's one of these traits of a human being that no matter what, when you balance the books, it's a net good. It's not a negative, it's a positive, And I wish at least more people would fall into this column of egocentricity, this form of egocentricity where you want to help, versus those who don't, right? But then I have to think of that English expression, the road to hell is paved in good intentions, right? So, if you're not, if you're not conscious. But I don't think you're like that. At least that's not the you I've observed.
No, I don't think so either, no.
I don't think it's ego-driven.
No.
And I see that especially because you get really worried about people.
No.
So,
it's not ego-driven, no. I feel it strongly as something natural. It comes easy.
It comes easy.
It comes easy.
It comes naturally to you, and it is. That's what's really nicest about you. That it is your nature by default, right? And it's also very nice to see that the good. Not that you're a good guy, because that's too simplistic, but having good values as a human being, right? It's not mutually exclusive from building a successful career in a very demanding field, a field where conflict is at the heart of everything. Yeah?
Sure, yeah.
And here you are, a good-natured person in a field where conflict drives everything, and you've built a successful career out of that. That's a nice wake-up call, I think.
Actually, it's nice that you use the word conflict. Coming at the end of my career, I start having fun with conflict, because I used to not avoid conflicts, but always build a solution. And now, I take it as a fun tool sometimes to go into conflict. Of course, not against my client's will, but when he wants it. And I can be absolutely horrible. And I hadn't known how horrible I could be, how tough I could be. But it's as a tool, So suddenly I'm going into this conflict world, and I'm discovering it. It's funny to say for a lawyer at the end of his career. And I see that it can also be a very powerful tool, and that I have abilities to use it very strongly. Probably after being so many years as non-conflictual as possible, I can be very conflictual if I had to, and it doesn't affect me.
I want to ask about this. What have you done to not let it affect you? Because when I face conflict, it feels to creep into the deepest part of me. You know what I mean? I feel so affected by conflict.
Okay, yeah, but I'm talking of conflicts I'm having for clients. I'm not talking my own conflicts. My own conflicts are just as difficult as for you. Being a lawyer and being used to conflict doesn't protect you from having difficulties with your personal conflict.
Okay, but let's talk about professionally.
But professionally, no. You suddenly realize that being very tough, saying very cruel things, and behaving very hard is actually not that difficult. It's probably easier than finding a way out. It's easier and it's funny. And it's funny because especially having after a career like mine, people are surprised to see suddenly, well, wow, how tough this guy is. We would never imagined, you know. So yeah, it's a bit like theater, you know. Suddenly I realize I can be an actor who is the black guy on the scene.
So that means that's something you've discovered, which is it doesn't matter what you think of me when I'm playing the bad guy,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's why people avoid. Conflict, as I explained it, in my experience, is a singular idea. But what you're saying is no, conflict can be split.
Yeah.
And if you have the ability to split and say this is work or professional conflict,
Yeah.
right, and I'm stepping into it,
Yeah.
right, then you don't care anymore because you know whatever they perceive Luke to be in that situation is not who you are as a human.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because I don't think it's as straightforward for everyone to be able to split that. You kind of feel how people think of you or what they say of you at the office is how they're going to think of you as a human being,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And then you avoid that. So why did it took you years to get to that point, right?
Yeah.
What happened before you got to that point? You were just how I'm describing myself. You thought that there had to be one version of you dealing in conflict.
I think for many years you pursue what you naturally are made for. Is probably as you describe me, is to build up solutions and find ways out and in the best interest of the people to help, you know. And you think the way of helping is only getting people out of their trouble. But now with years you discover that the other way also works. It's more painful and it takes more time, it costs more money to your client, but it can also work sometimes. And you realize that the tools that are there are quite fun tools. You know, writing something very tough or saying something very tough or pleading a very hard line is quite amusing as a lawyer. It actually is quite amusing. Yeah. You see the reaction of the judge, you see the reaction of the other party. Your client can be very happy thinking, oh my God, he's being very tough. And so it's a bit the show part. So I'm enjoying now the show part. And maybe after this conversation, I'll dare going into court in a terrible case with my long hair to make the show part even worse.
Let me know. I want to witness that moment. Huh? Speaking of the show of practicing law and the show that is the current legal practice, right? How do you think the show is going to change with things like artificial intelligence coming in, technology creeping into so many different professions, you know? Do you think the picture of what is a legal practice, how a lawyer operates, will that change?
Oh, it is changing, definitely. I think people are getting less creative because everything is computerized, everything is memorized. You can now, even in America, and I think in Europe too also, there are now systems, you give you the facts, and the machine will say, considering all the court cases that it has registered, your chances of winning or losing. So it's going to become much less interesting. I think the part of the human being and the part of the human thinking is going to diminish, which is in a way quite scary. So definitely all this is going to change very, very dramatically. I think my profession, the technical part of my profession is going to change very much. And yeah, it's going to be more and more computerized. People don't want to pay as much also because, of course, it takes much more time to read the whole case and think of it and go and look at the law and think how creative or how does the law that exists now apply to your case or not. Then it's going to take more time. It's probably going to be more efficient. It's probably going to make the law move ahead more than just a computerized system. But unfortunately, the computerized system, it turns out to be much cheaper and much more efficient. I read a case where they gave a set of facts to a classical lawyer. It took him like 8 hours to find the proper, what would be considered as the proper solution. And the same set of facts given to a machine, it took like a minute 52 seconds. So, you just cannot compare. So, yeah, there are definitely going to be radical changes in the way we're going to function.
But look, wouldn't that be an example that may apply to certain fields or areas of law and not in others? I mean, like criminal law, I can't imagine that artificial intelligence will be able to, figure things out that much quicker. Maybe on technical things,
Well, yeah, you're right. It'll probably less apply to criminal law, but still, you'll be able to say with a set of facts to someone who has killed another person with a weapon and to shooting from that distance and in that psychological state, the machine will tell you that there are 383 cases in Northern America that's similar, and that the average sentence was this and that. So it'll certainly give you direction. But you're true, in criminal law, it'll be less effective than it would be in civil law or in contract drafting. In contract drafting, things are definitely going to be totally automatic.
Okay, so there are areas where there will be very little legal work.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah? Will there be...
There'll be legal work into feeding all these computer systems, but once they're there and you buy them, I think it's radically going to change the way you work. I mean, already think of the libraries and the authors. You don't have any bookshelves anymore. You have everything on your computer, and then you have automatic systems. You type article so-and-so of such law, and it'll give you all the court cases, all the authors and everything, and then you put a specific word, and it'll give you everything linked to that word that has been said in the courts or by the authors.
Are there younger lawyers coming into the firm now? Do you see a shift in the way they are perceiving what their career path is going to be as lawyers?
Yeah, they only trust what they find on the computers.
Really?
They only trust that, and they would tend to copy, which is not wrong, but they will copy the reasoning that you find on the systems, and we would more do ourselves. You would read the law, and then you would try to say to the judge, this is the way the law should be applied. Yeah, the way of thinking is definitely changing. Yes.
I don't know. Maybe I watch too much television, and I know I do, right? Especially legal dramas, but I kind of feel it's a field of, it's a professional area that for me sits alongside great oratory traditions like poets, etc., right? And if things get taken over by machines, there's something of the magic of a human mind and the ability to speak and present and restructure ideas that's going to get lost as well.
You'll keep that part in criminal cases, but in all the other cases, the more technical cases, the civil law cases, it's going to be definitely less interesting for sure. Yeah, but the criminal part will still say. But you have to remember that the legal systems are very different, be it in a civil law country or in a common law country, common law like England or America.
Yeah.
So there are big differences. But generally speaking, all the technicalities of the law are going to be mastered faster, and ultimately, I would say, with less creative mind. But all the oral part, which is the pleading part, especially in criminal cases, especially in countries where they still have juries, there the word will still have its strength. But many countries don't have juries anymore. The Americans still have juries. They're probably among the last ones to have juries.
Yeah, and maybe
non-professional judges.
And what's your take or your opinion on that? A jury, a trial by jury versus a trial by a judge?
I have no experience of any juries because by the time I became a lawyer, the juries had just been entirely suppressed in my country. So the juries I see is only the television juries. So I have no experience as a lawyer, so I don't really have an opinion on that. But it makes the job of the lawyer more interesting because I think your capacity to convince people that are just lay normal people that are not educated lawyers or experienced people in the law, your influence on them is probably much bigger to find out, is he guilty or not guilty. That's quite interesting, but it's a big challenge. And it's a very big challenge to the jurors too.
Yeah, and for me the fascinating part is you have a judge who understands the law, who's got in-depth knowledge of the law, and the danger of that is that it might become too restrictive in your openness towards stepping out of the framework of the law. And then you have a jury of 12 people, right, who have no understanding of the law except the basics. Maybe some of them might. And here's your job, not just to inform them of the law, but to present the law in the favor of your side, right?
Sure.
And convince 12 different minds.
And as far as I understand the system, also you have an influence on how you choose jurors.
Yes.
What type of juror? What his background? depending on the case. If it's unfortunately, which is now become the fashion, a colored matter case, well, maybe, if it's been a black being assassinated, you'd probably, want this type of juror more than that other type. So it's a different job, and I have no experience in that.
Yeah. Would you be interested in that kind of practice of law?
Yeah,
Has it ever fascinated you?
Yeah, I would quite be interested, once to experience that. Yeah.
But you did study in America, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
But I didn't practice.
No. So, okay. Luc, one more question. And this is something personal to me, and I'm really curious. Speaking of minds, I have a great discomfort whenever I process a situation, a moment, any given thing I'm facing in a black and white way. Where I think there's a good and a bad in everything, in something that's happening, right? Because I kind of feel that life happens in the gray in between, and I should have the intellectual capacity to not fall into the trap of thinking anything is black and white, but try to find the gray so I can understand it from different perspectives. How do you feel about this kind of binary thinking of there's a right and a wrong?
Meaning generally in my life?
Generally speaking, about different aspects of your life and things that happen. Does it have value to think that way?
Well, it certainly has, because it makes things easier if everything was either white or black. But as you say, often things turn out to be in the middle gray. In my practice, as I said, as I've been a lot focusing on finding solutions, building solutions, you end up in the gray. So I think probably in my whole life, I'm always building up the compromise. But with age, you think, well, what the hell? It's easier to say black or white. It takes less time. It's less time consuming. The older you get, the more precious time it gets, and you think, oh, what the hell? Why should I think too much? It's good. I think it's white, and I'm going to behave as if it was white. And sometimes I tend to do that now. So then you turn out to be a little bit more egoistic also. You do less compromise. Say, I consider it's white. I don't care if it's gray or black. I think it's white, and I have good reasons to believe it's right. So then you achieve what you want to achieve much, much faster. So it's time saving.
So that's efficiency.
Efficiency.
Right? For efficiency's sake, you would conveniently choose to process things in a black and white way.
Systematically, but I probably do it a little more than I used to.
And is there any aspect of your life where you would see the value of not going down that road?
Probably, but I'm not aware of them, no.
No?
No.
Okay. Luc, it's been a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure too,
yeah.
brother-in-law Tony.
And I think it's going to be very interesting. It kind of feels, and you've also mentioned this, that you're on the cusp, on the verge of making a big decision. Freedom, right? Freedom. So when you've crossed the Rubicon and you're doing that thing that is all about freedom, let's sit and talk again, and I want to know how life looks at that point in time.
Great, looking forward to it. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.